Welcome to the family. If you enjoy powerful stories and wild adventures, subscribe now, hit like and share with someone who will love it too. Captain Marcus Kane had seen many disturbing things during his 15 years trading on the Outer Rim, but the slave markets of Kepler Station still made his stomach turn. The cramped holding pens, the electric prods, the desperate eyes of beings from dozens of worlds. It was a reminder that civilization had a long way to go even among the stars. He wasn't here by choice. His cargo ship, the Wanderer, needed critical repairs, and the only mechanic willing to work on human vessels operated out of this cesspit. Marcus had planned to keep his head down, complete the transaction, and leave as quickly as possible. That plan changed when he saw her. The Avalian girl couldn't have been more than 20 in human years, her pale blue skin marked with the distinctive silver patterns of her species. Her large violet eyes held a defiance that the auction house's conditioning hadn't managed to break. She stood straight despite the neural collar around her neck, chin raised as the auctioneer's voice boomed across the crowded amphitheater. Lot 47. A prime Avalian female trained in domestic service and engineering applications. Bidding starts at 5,000 credits. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. The Avalians were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and peaceful nature. Their homeworld had been overrun by the hegemony 3 years ago, and their people had been scattered to the solar winds. Most ended up in places like this. 5,000, called a Vorthan trader, his 4 arms gesticulating wildly. 7,000, counted a human in expensive clothes, probably a colony administrator looking for cheap labor. The girl's eyes swept the crowd, and for a moment they locked with Marcus's. He saw something there that made his decision for him. Not pleading, not desperation, but a quiet dignity that refused to be extinguished. 10,000 credits, Marcus called out, his voice cutting through the din. The auctioneer's eye stalks swiveled toward him. We have 10,000 from the human captain. Do I hear 11? The Vorthan trader hissed in frustration but raised his bid. The price climbed steadily. 12, 15, 18,000. Marcus felt his savings account dwindling with each bid, but he couldn't stop now. Something about the girl's steady gaze held him fast. 25,000 credits, he announced, his voice steady despite the financial ruin he was courting. The amphitheater fell silent. 25,000 was more than most people made in a year. The other bidders exchanged glances and slowly shook their heads. 25,000 going once, twice. Sold to the human captain. As the neural collar was deactivated and the girl was led toward the transfer station, Marcus wondered what the hell he had just done. He'd spent nearly everything he had on a slave, something that went against every principle he held dear. But the moment she'd looked at him, he'd known. He couldn't let her fall into the hands of someone who would see her as mere property. The transfer process was mercifully quick. Credits changed hands, ownership documents were signed, and within an hour Marcus found himself walking back to his ship with the Avalian girl beside him. She hadn't spoken a word since leaving the auction block. It wasn't until they were safely aboard the Wanderer that she finally broke her silence. "Are you paid for me?" she said, her voice soft but clear with the musical quality common to her species. "Then I'm yours now." Marcus turned to face her, seeing the resignation in her violet eyes. "No," he said firmly, "you're not." Confusion flickered across her features. "I don't understand. The transaction was legal. I belong to you now." "Listen to me very carefully," Marcus said, moving to his desk and pulling out the ownership documents. Without hesitation, he fed them into the shredder. "You don't belong to anyone. You're free." The girl stared at the destroyed papers, then back at him. "Free?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Free," Marcus confirmed. "What's your name?" For the first time since he'd seen her, tears began to form in her eyes. "Kira," she whispered. "My name is Kira." 3 days had passed since Marcus had destroyed Kira's ownership papers, but she still seemed to expect him to change his mind. She moved through the ship like a ghost, completing tasks that no one had asked her to do, speaking only when directly addressed. Marcus had given her the small guest cabin, but he often found her sleeping on the floor beside it, as if she didn't believe she deserved the comfort of a bed. You know you don't have to clean the engine compartment, Marcus said, finding her elbow deep in the ship's power coupling assembly. The maintenance bots handle that. Kira's head emerged from the machinery, her silver facial markings now smudged with grease. The harmonic resonance in your primary drive coil is off by 0.03%. If left uncorrected, you'll have a cascade failure within 2 weeks. Marcus blinked. He'd been planning to have that looked at when they reached the next station. How did you know that? Avalians have enhanced hearing. I can detect the frequency variations. She wiped her hands on a rag, avoiding his eyes. I thought if I proved useful, you might let me stay. The quiet desperation in her voice made Marcus's chest tighten. Kira, look at me. When she didn't respond, he repeated her name more gently. Kira. She finally met his gaze, and he saw the fear there. Fear of abandonment, of being cast out into a hostile galaxy with nowhere. To go. You can stay as long as you want, he said, but not as property. As crew if you're willing. As a friend if you'll have me. But never as something I own. Kira studied his face for a long moment, as if searching for deception. Why? She asked. Finally. Why would you spend your money to free a stranger? What do you gain? Marcus settled down on a nearby crate, considering his words carefully. My grandfather used to tell me stories about old Earth, before we reached the stars. About a time when humans kept other humans as slaves. He said it was one of the darkest chapters in our history, and that we swore never to let it happen again. But slavery exists throughout the galaxy, Kira pointed out. The hegemony built their empire on it. Just because others do it doesn't make it right. Marcus gestured around the ship. This vessel is my home, but it's also my statement. I won't participate in a system that treats people as commodities. Kira was quiet for several minutes, absently adjusting components in the power coupling. The hegemony came to my world when I was 17, she said eventually. They told us we were being integrated into their empire for our own protection. Within 6 months, half my people were dead, and the rest were being sold in markets like the one where you found me. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and meant it. I was studying to be an engineer at the Technical Institute on Avila Prime. I wanted to design starships that could explore the furthest reaches of space. She gave a bitter laugh. Instead, I learned how to scrub floors and keep my eyes down when the overseers walked by. What's stopping you from designing starships now? Marcus asked. Kira looked at him as if he'd asked why she couldn't fly unaided through space. I'm property. Slaves don't become engineers. Former property, Marcus corrected. And you just diagnosed a drive coil problem that my ship's computer missed. Sounds like engineering to me. For the first time since he'd known her, Kira smiled. It was small and tentative, but it transformed her face entirely. There's something else you should know, Marcus continued. We're not just wandering aimlessly out here. I'm part of an informal network. Ship captains, traders even. Some military folks who've gone independent. We call ourselves the Underground Railroad. Underground Railroad. Another reference to old Earth history. We help people escape from slavery, transport refugees to safe worlds, that sort of thing. It's dangerous work, and it doesn't pay well, but it's the right thing to do. Kira's violet eyes widened. You're criminals. In the eyes of the hegemony and their allies, yes. In the eyes of the people we've helped. Marcus shrugged. I'll let them be the judge. She was quiet again, processing this information. Finally, she asked, what would you need me to do? Only what you're comfortable with, but if you're serious about that engineering background, I could use someone who understands how to modify ship systems. Sometimes we need to move fast or hide from sensors or create false transponder signals to avoid checkpoints, Kira finished. Boost communication arrays to coordinate with other ships. Modify cargo holds to create hidden compartments, Marcus grinned. Exactly. Kira looked down at her hands, still stained with grease from the engine work. I spent 2 years believing I was nothing more than property, that my life had no value beyond what someone was willing to pay for me. And now, she met his eyes. Again, and this time there was something new there. Not just hope, but determination. Now I think I'd like to help make sure no one else has to feel that way. Marcus extended his hand. Welcome to the crew, Engineer Kira. She stared at his outstretched hand for a moment, then slowly reached out and shook it. Her grip was firm and steady. Thank you, Captain Kane, for everything. 2 weeks after Kira joined his crew, Marcus received an encrypted message through the Underground Railroad's secure channels. The contents made his blood run cold. What is it? Kira asked, noticing his expression as she looked up from the navigation console where she'd been recalibrating the sensor array. Emergency extraction request. There's a hegemony processing facility on Nexus 7. Apparently they're liquidating their assets ahead of a scheduled inspection by the Galactic Council. Kira's face went pale. She knew as well as he did what liquidating assets meant in hegemony terminology. How many? The message says 200, maybe more. Mix of species, mostly taken during recent integration campaigns. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the decision ahead. The thing is, Nexus 7 is deep in hegemony space. It's not just dangerous, it's practically suicide. But you're going anyway. It wasn't a question. Kira had gotten to know him well enough over the past 2 weeks to recognize the set of his jaw when he'd made up his mind about something. I have to try. There's a sympathetic dock worker who can get us access to the facility, but the window, fair's narrow. We'd have maybe 6 hours before the hegemony fleet realizes what's happening. Kira turned back to her console, her fingers flying over the controls. I'm calculating jump coordinates now. If we modify the hyperdrive to run 20% over specifications, we can cut the travel time to 14 hours. That's incredibly dangerous. The drive could overload. Not if we reroute power from non-essential systems and recalibrate the magnetic containment field. She looked up at him with fierce determination. I won't let 200 people die because we were too scared to take a risk. Marcus felt a surge of pride in his new crew member. All right, but we do this smart. What else do we need? Forged cargo manifests to explain our presence. I can hack into the hegemony's shipping database and create a legitimate-looking delivery order. Kira's fingers were already moving across her workstation. We'll need somewhere to put 200 refugees once we extract them. I've got contacts on 3 different worlds willing to take refugees, but none of them can handle that many at once. We'll have to split them up. That means multiple jumps, which means more fuel than we're carrying. Marcus pulled up the ship's resource inventory on his tablet. We'll have to make some hard choices about what to leave behind. Everything non-essential goes into storage before we leave. They worked through the night, planning every detail of the operation. Kira proved to have an aptitude for subterfuge that surprised them both, creating a complex web of false documentation that would make their presence at Nexus 7 appear completely legitimate. According to these records, she explained, highlighting various entries on her screen, we're delivering replacement parts for the facility's waste processing system, unglamorous enough that no one will want to look too closely, but important enough that they'll want us to complete the job quickly. And the extraction itself? The sympathetic contact, callsign Lighthouse, will trigger a power failure in the detention block at precisely 1400 hours. Emergency protocols will unlock all cell doors automatically. In the confusion, our people make their way to loading Bay 7 where we'll be waiting. Marcus studied the facility schematics they'd managed to acquire. It's a good plan, but there are so many variables. If even one thing goes wrong, then we adapt. Kira's voice was steady, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. Captain, these people are living through what I lived through. Every day they wake up believing they're nothing more than property, that their lives have no value. If we can give even half of them a chance at freedom, it's worth the risk, Marcus finished. I know. I feel the same way. They made the jump. To hyperspace 6 hours later, the modified drive humming with barely contained energy. Marcus kept a close eye on the engineering readouts, but Kira's calculations proved accurate. The ship held together, and they emerged from hyperspace in the outer edge of the Nexus 7 system, right on schedule. Nexus 7 control. This is cargo vessel Wanderer requesting approach clearance, Marcus transmitted on the standard commercial frequency. We have a priority delivery for processing facility Alpha. Wanderer, you are cleared for approach. Transmit your cargo manifest and proceed to docking bay 12. As their ship descended through the planet's atmosphere, Marcus caught sight of Processing Facility Alpha through the viewport. It was a massive complex of grey buildings surrounded by energy barriers and guard towers. Somewhere inside those walls, 200 people were waiting for death or rescue. "Lighthouse, this is Wanderer," Kira transmitted on the secure channel. "We're beginning our approach." "Copy, Wanderer. The package is ready for pickup. You'll have your window at 1400 hours as planned." Marcus checked his chronometer. 2 hours and 37 minutes. Everything depended on perfect timing. "Kira," he said quietly, "once we start this, there's no going back. Are you sure? You're ready?" She looked at him with those violet eyes, and he saw no fear there, only determination. "I've been ready since the day you destroyed those ownership papers." The loading bay of Processing Facility Alpha buzzed with the mundane activity of a typical workday. Guards checked manifests while automated systems moved cargo containers with mechanical precision. To all appearances, the delivery of waste processing components by the cargo ship Wanderer was exactly as routine as it was supposed to be. Marcus and Kira worked methodically to unload their fake cargo, maintaining their cover while keeping one. High on the chronometer, 1400 hours was approaching fast. "Hey, you two," called one of the guards, a burly hegemony enforcer with cybernetic implants covering half his face. "Move it along. We've got 3 more deliveries scheduled before shift change." "Almost finished," Marcus replied, hefting another component container. "Just need to run a systems check to make sure nothing was damaged in transit." The guard grunted and moved on, apparently satisfied. Kira caught Marcus's eye and tapped her wrist. 2 minutes to go. At exactly 1400 hours, the lights went out. Emergency illumination kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Warning klaxons began to sound, and somewhere in the distance Marcus could hear shouts and the pounding of running feet. "What the hell?" the guard started to say, but his words were cut off as the facility's public address system crackled. "To life. Attention all personnel, we are experiencing a system-wide power failure. All non-essential personnel report to designated emergency stations. Detention block guards maintain positions at all costs." Marcus and Kira exchanged glances. The last part wasn't part of their plan, but they'd have to adapt. "This way," Kira whispered, leading him toward a maintenance corridor she'd identified in the facility schematics. They moved quickly but carefully, avoiding the main passages where security teams would be responding to the crisis. They reached Loading Bay 7 just as the first refugees began to arrive. Marcus's heart clenched as he saw them, beings from a dozen different worlds, all bearing the unmistakable marks of prolonged captivity. Hollow eyes, malnourished bodies, the defeated posture of people who had given up hope. "This way, quickly now," Kira called out in a voice that somehow managed to be both urgent and reassuring. "We're here to help." A tall reptilian saurian was among the first to reach them. "You're the rescue ship?" he asked in accented standard. "That's right. I'm Captain Kane. This is Engineer Kira. How many are with you?" "Maybe 60 from our block." The guards were trying to maintain lockdown, but some of the humans overpowered them when the doors opened. Marcus felt a surge of pride in his species, even as he worried about the implications. "Did anyone get hurt?" "Some injuries, nothing fatal. But it won't be long before they restore full power and reorganize their security." More refugees were arriving now, a group of Centaurians with their distinctive blue-green skin, several humans of various ages, and others Marcus didn't immediately recognize. Each face told a story of suffering, but also of fragile, newly born hope. "Listen up, everyone," Marcus called out as the group assembled. "We don't have much time. Our ship can't take all of you at once, so we're going to make multiple runs. The wounded and elderly go first, followed by families with children. Everyone else will have to wait for the second trip." "What about the other blocks?" asked a human. "Woman holding a young child. There are more detention areas, more people." Marcus felt the weight of those words. Every instinct told him to help as many as possible, but he also knew the limits of what they could accomplish. "We'll do what we can," he promised, "but right now, we need to focus on getting you all to safety." The loading process began with practiced efficiency. Kira had prepared the cargo hold with makeshift seating and life support modifications to accommodate the refugees. It wasn't comfortable, but it would keep them alive during the journey to freedom. That's when the shooting started. The sharp crack of energy weapons echoed through the facility, followed by shouts and screams. The power had been restored to critical systems, and hegemony security forces were mobilizing faster than expected. "Lighthouse, what's your status?" Kira transmitted urgently. "Compromised," came the reply. "Security forces are sweeping the detention blocks. You need to go now." Marcus looked at the remaining refugees, nearly 100 people still waiting for rescue. The thought of leaving them behind made him physically ill, but staying would mean the death of everyone they'd already saved. "Captain," the Saurian said quietly, "you have to take the ones you can. Don't let our sacrifice be meaningless." "This isn't over," Marcus replied firmly. "We'll be back." "No, you won't," the Saurian said with sad certainty. "But maybe others will because of what you've done today." The sound of approaching footsteps decided the matter. "Everyone aboard now!" Marcus shouted. As the last refugee scrambled into the cargo hold, Kira was already firing up the ship's engines. The Wanderer lifted off from the landing pad just as hegemony security forces burst into the loading bay, their weapons trained on empty air. In the cargo hold, 87 beings who had woken up that morning as slaves now breathed the air of freedom. It wasn't everyone they'd wanted to save, but it was a start. "Jump coordinates laid in," Kira reported from the pilot's seat. "Hyperspace in 30 seconds. Marcus took one last look at Processing Facility Alpha as it fell away beneath them. Somewhere in that complex, more than 100 people were probably facing interrogation or worse because of their escape attempt. The knowledge sat in his stomach like a stone. But as he looked around at the faces of the people they had saved, people who were already beginning to smile and talk quietly among themselves, Marcus knew they'd made the right choice. Sometimes you couldn't save everyone. Sometimes you had to be content with saving who you could. "Ready for jump," Kira announced. "Take us home," Marcus said. As the stars stretched into lines and the Wanderer entered hyperspace, Marcus silently promised the people they'd left behind that their sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. The Underground Railroad would return to Nexus 7. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they would return, because that's what humans did. They never gave up. The aftermath of the Nexus 7 extraction hit them 3 days into their journey to the first safe haven. Marcus was in his quarters reviewing dispersal plans for the refugees when Kira burst through the door, her face pale with alarm. "Captain, we have a problem. A big one." Marcus followed her to the bridge where she'd pulled up a galactic newsfeed on the main display. The headline made his blood run cold. "Terrorist attack on hegemony facility leaves 23 dead." The news anchor, a professionally composed Centaurian female, continued her report with clinical detachment. "The attack on Processing Facility Alpha appears to have been coordinated by members of the criminal organization known as the Underground Railroad. Hegemony officials report that 23 loyal personnel died during the assault, including facility administrator Grix Valdoon." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "We didn't kill anyone. We didn't even have weapons." Kira's fingers flew over her console, pulling up additional news sources. "It gets worse. They're claiming we murdered the guards and executed Valdoon as a warning to other facilities. Look at this." A security recording appeared on screen, clearly fabricated, showing figures in black combat gear storming through facility corridors with military-grade weapons. The timestamp matched their extraction operation perfectly. "Professional propaganda," Marcus observed grimly. "They're using our rescue mission to justify increased security measures across their entire slave network." "There's more." Kira switched to another feed. "They've put a bounty on our heads. 5 million credits for the Wanderer and her crew, dead or alive." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. 5 million credits would turn every bounty hunter, mercenary, and desperate trader in the galaxy into their enemy. They couldn't dock at any major station, couldn't take on legitimate cargo runs, couldn't even trust old friends not to sell them out. A soft knock at the bridge entrance interrupted his thoughts. Tarek, the Saurian who had helped organize the refugees during their escape, stood in the doorway. "Captain, forgive the intrusion, but some of us have been monitoring the news feeds. We know what the hegemony is saying about the extraction." "I'm sorry you had to see that," Marcus said. "They're lying, of course, but "We know they're lying," Tarek interrupted gently. "We were there. We saw how carefully you planned the operation, how you risked everything to avoid violence. But that's not why I'm here." He stepped fully onto the bridge, his reptilian features set with determination. "Some of us have been talking. We want to join you." Marcus blinked. "Join us?" "The Underground Railroad. We've all lost everything to the hegemony, our homes, our families, our freedom. Most of us have nothing to go back to even if we could, but we can make sure other people don't suffer the way we did." Kira looked up from her console. "Tarek, it's not that simple. This kind of work is dangerous, and now that we're wanted criminals, you think living as refugees is safe?" Tarek's laugh was bitter. "At least this way our lives would have meaning. At least we'd be fighting back." Over the next hour, more refugees approached them with the same request. Dr. Maya Reeves, a human physician who'd been enslaved after her hospital ship was captured by pirates. Jorik, a young Avalian whose engineering skills rivaled Kira's own. A dozen others, each with their own story of loss, but also their own specialized skills. "They have a point," Kira said quietly, as she and Marcus reviewed the requests in his quarters that evening. "We're going to need help if we want to keep operating. One ship, 2 people. We can only do so much." "It's not the manpower I'm worried about," Marcus replied. "It's the responsibility. These people have already suffered enough. Do I have the right to ask them to risk their lives again?" "You're not asking. They're volunteering." Marcus stared out the viewport at the swirling patterns of hyperspace. "Once they join us, there's no going back. The hegemony doesn't forgive, and they never forget. Everyone who helps us becomes a target. Everyone who doesn't help them remains a victim," Kira countered. "Sometimes the choice isn't between safe and dangerous. It's between meaningful and meaningless." The next morning, Marcus called a general assembly in the cargo hold. All 87 refugees gathered, their faces showing a mixture of hope and apprehension. "You all know why we're here," Marcus began. "The hegemony has branded us terrorists and criminals. Anyone associated with us is now in danger. When we reach our destination, you'll be given new identities and a chance to start over somewhere safe." He paused, meeting as many eyes as he could. "But some of you have expressed interest in joining our organization. I want to be absolutely clear about what that means. You'll be hunted. You'll never be safe. You'll spend your lives helping strangers while never knowing if the next mission will be your last." The cargo hold was silent for a long moment. Then Tarek stood up. "Captain, with respect, you're describing the life we've already been living. The only difference is that now we get to choose our own risks." Dr. Reeves rose as well. "I became a doctor to help people. Under the hegemony, I was forced to treat only those they deemed worthy. This is my chance to practice medicine the way it was meant to be practiced." One by one, others stood. Not all of them. About half chose to accept new identities and start over in peaceful obscurity. But 37 refugees chose to join the Underground Railroad, each bringing skills that would make future operations more effective. "All right," Marcus said finally, "but we do this right. No one goes into the field without proper training. We establish better protocols, better security, better everything. If we're going to be criminals, we're going to be the most professional criminals in the galaxy." Kira stepped forward. "I've been thinking about our next move. The hegemony expects us to run and hide after Nexus 7. Instead, what if we escalate? Meaning we hit 3 facilities simultaneously. Show them that Nexus 7 wasn't a fluke, it was the beginning of something bigger." Marcus felt a chill of excitement mixed with terror. "That would require more ships, more personnel, more coordination than we've ever attempted." "Which is why it's perfect," Tarek added. "They'll never see it coming." Looking around at the faces of his new crew, former slaves who had chosen to risk everything for the freedom of others, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just for their mission, but for what they represented. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds, and now they weren't facing them alone. "All right," he said, "let's plan a revolution." 6 months after the Nexus 7 extraction, the Underground Railroad had transformed from a loose collection of independent operators into something resembling an actual organization. Marcus barely recognized the movement he'd once been a small part of. The Wanderer now served as the flagship of a fleet of 12 vessels, each crewed by former slaves who had chosen to fight rather than hide. They operated from a hidden base in the Kepler asteroid field, an abandoned mining station that Dr. Reeves had somehow convinced a sympathetic corporate executive to lose in the bureaucratic shuffle. "Status report," Marcus called as he entered. The station's main operations center, a bustling hub of activity that hummed with controlled urgency 24 hours a day. Kira looked up from a holographic display showing ship positions throughout 3 sectors. The Liberation just completed a successful extraction from Hegemony Station 447. 43 refugees, no casualties. Captain Torres is requesting permission to attempt a second run. "Denied," Marcus said immediately. "We don't go back to the same target twice in one operation. That's how people get killed." That's what I told him. Kira highlighted another section of the display. "The Freedom and Defiance are in position for the Kepler Prime operation. Tarek confirms that all systems are green for the synchronized assault." Marcus nodded, studying the tactical display. Tomorrow's operation would be their most ambitious yet. Simultaneous strikes on 3 separate hegemony facilities, designed to overwhelm their response capabilities and rescue nearly 600 enslaved beings. "Any word from our intelligence sources?" "Maya has news from her contacts in the medical community." Kira gestured toward Dr. Reeves, who was hunched over a communications terminal across the room. "Apparently the hegemony is accelerating their liquidation timeline. They're planning to eliminate their entire slave population over the next 6 months. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. They'd known the hegemony was ruthless, but genocide on this scale was almost incomprehensible. "How many people? Are we talking about?" "Conservative estimate. 2 million beings across 47 facilities." Marcus sank into a chair, the weight of those numbers crushing down on him. Even if they tripled their current operational capacity, they couldn't save more than a fraction of those people. "Captain," came a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see Alex Chen, a former human slave who had become one of their most effective infiltration specialists. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a priority communication coming in. It's encrypted with the highest level protocols." Marcus followed Alex to a secure communications booth, wondering what crisis awaited them now. The face that appeared on the screen was unexpected. Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Independent Colonial Defense Force, one of the few military leaders who had openly criticized the hegemony's policies. "Captain Kane," the Admiral said without preamble, "we need to talk." "Admiral Mitchell, this is unexpected." "I'm sure it is. But circumstances have changed, and so have opportunities." Her expression was grave. "The Colonial Defense Force has been monitoring your operations for the past 6 months. Officially, we consider you criminals. Unofficially, many of us consider you heroes." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "What are you saying, Admiral?" "I'm saying that the genocide you're trying to prevent has caught the attention of some very important people. People with resources, influence, and a growing desire to see the hegemony's power broken. The implications were staggering." "Are you talking about official government support?" "I'm talking about plausible deniability," Admiral Mitchell replied carefully. "The Colonial Defense Force can't openly support criminal organizations, but we can certainly lose track of certain ships, overlook certain supply transfers, and experience convenient communication failures at strategic moments." Over the next hour, Admiral Mitchell outlined a proposal that would have seemed impossible just days before. Selected CDF vessels would provide intelligence and logistical support to underground railroad operations. In exchange, the railroad would focus their efforts on targets that also served broader strategic interests. "There's more," the Admiral continued. "We've been in contact with resistance movements on 17 different worlds. Former hegemony subjects who are ready to fight back but lack the coordination and resources to be effective. You could provide that coordination." Marcus felt the scope of their mission expanding exponentially. They were no longer just rescuing slaves. They were potentially helping to organize a galaxy-wide rebellion. "What's the catch?" he asked, because there always was one. "The catch is that this becomes a real war, with real casualties on both sides. No more surgical strikes with zero violence. The hegemony won't go quietly, and they have the firepower to make any conflict very bloody. After the Admiral's transmission ended, Marcus found himself walking the station's corridors, trying to process the magnitude of what they were being offered. He eventually ended up in the observation deck, where Kira was staring out at the asteroid field. "I heard about the Admiral's proposal," she said without turning around. "The whole station's buzzing with rumors." "What do you think?" Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. "I think we're at a crossroads. We can stay small, stay focused on individual rescue operations, and save maybe 10,000 people over the next few years. Or we can think bigger, risk everything, and maybe save millions. And maybe get everyone killed in the process." Kira turned to face him, her violet eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. "Marcus, do you remember what you told me the day you freed me? You said your grandfather used to tell stories about old Earth, about a time when humans kept other humans as slaves. I remember. You said humans swore never to let it happen again, but it is happening again, isn't it? Not just to humans, but to everyone. Maybe it's time we remembered what humans are capable of when they decide something is unacceptable." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching a maintenance drone navigate between the asteroids with mechanical precision. "If we do this, there's no going back. We'll be committing ourselves and everyone who follows us to a war that could last decades." "The war is already happening," Kira replied. "The only question is whether we're going to fight it or just try to minimize the casualties." 3 days later, Marcus stood before the assembled crews of all 12 railroad ships, broadcast simultaneously to resistance cells on 17 worlds. The decision had been made not just by him, but by every person who had chosen to risk their life for the freedom of others. "6 months ago, we were a handful of individuals trying to save who we could," he began. "Today, we have the opportunity to become something more. Not just rescuers, but liberators. Not just rebels, but revolutionaries." He paused, looking out at faces that had once been marked by despair, but now blazed with determined hope. "The hegemony wants us to believe that slavery is the natural order of things, that some beings are born to serve while others are born to rule. They're wrong. Every person in this galaxy has the right to choose their own destiny, to live free from fear, to be treated with dignity and respect." Cheers erupted from the assembled crowd, both on the station and transmitted from distant worlds. "Tomorrow we begin the largest coordinated operation in our history. 47 facilities, 17 worlds, coordinated strikes designed to cripple the hegemony slave network permanently. It won't be easy, people will die, but their sacrifice will mean that millions of others get to live free." As the crowd dispersed to make final preparations, Tarek approached Marcus with a data pad in his clawed hands. "Captain, I've been working on something for tomorrow's operation, a message we can broadcast on all frequencies once the strikes begin." Marcus took the pad and read the text Tarek had prepared. It was simple, direct, and powerful. "To all beings held in bondage throughout the galaxy, you are not property. You are not cargo, you are people, deserving of freedom, dignity, and hope. Today that hope has a name, the Underground Railroad. We are coming for you. Hold on." "It's perfect," Marcus said, handing back the pad. "Make sure every ship has a copy." That night, as the station prepared for what might be the most important day in galactic history, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He walked the corridors one last time, checking on preparations, offering words of encouragement to nervous crew members, trying to project a confidence he didn't entirely feel. In the communications center, he found Kira running final systems, checks on the coordination network that would link all their operations. "Can't sleep either?" she asked without looking up from her console. "Too much riding on tomorrow," Marcus admitted. "If this fails, we don't just lose the opportunity, we lose everything. The hegemony will hunt down every person associated with us. And if it succeeds," Marcus considered the question, "if it succeeds, we change the galaxy. We prove that ordinary people can stand up to tyranny and win. We give hope to every enslaved being in known space." Kira finally turned to face him, and he saw no fear in her violet eyes, only the same determination that had marked her since the day he'd destroyed her ownership papers. "Then we'd better make sure it succeeds." The attack began at exactly 0600 Galactic Standard Time, across 17 star systems simultaneously. Marcus watched from the bridge of the Wanderer as 12 separate tactical feeds showed underground railroad ships emerging from hyperspace around their designated targets. "All teams report ready," Kira announced from the communications station. "Coordination network is stable across all operations." Marcus activated the fleet-wide channel. "This is Captain Kane to all railroad vessels. Today we stop running and start fighting. Today we remind the galaxy what freedom looks like. Execute Operation Liberation." The response was immediate and devastating. Months of careful planning and intelligence gathering paid off as railroad teams struck with surgical precision. Security systems that should have detected incoming ships mysteriously malfunctioned. Guard rotations that should have been random followed predictable patterns. Facility commanders found their communications jammed at exactly the wrong moments. Admiral Mitchell's promised support proved invaluable. Colonial Defense Force navigation errors left hegemony reinforcement fleets hours away from the battle zones. Critical intelligence about facility layouts and security protocols had found its way into railroad hands through carefully orchestrated security breaches. "Facility Alpha 7 is secure," came the first report from Captain Torres aboard the T. Liberation. 233 rescued, minimal resistance encountered. More reports flooded in over the next hour. The Freedom had liberated 300 enslaved beings from a processing center on Kepler Prime. The Defiance had successfully evacuated 400 people from a labor camp on Centauri Beta. Across the galaxy, the coordinated strikes were exceeding even their most optimistic projections. But the hegemony wasn't helpless. As word of the attacks spread, their response became increasingly desperate and violent. "Wanderer, this is Courage," crackled a transmission from Captain Lisa Park, a former human slave who commanded one of their newest ships. "We've encountered heavy resistance at Facility Delta 9. They're executing prisoners rather than let us rescue them." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. "How many?" "Unknown. We're pushing forward, but they've activated the facility's self-destruct sequence. We have maybe 10 minutes before the whole complex goes up. Get your people out of there, Lisa. We can't save the dead." "Negative, Captain. There are still 500 people in the lower detention blocks. We're not leaving without them." The next 8 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He listened to the tactical chatter as the Courage team fought their way through increasingly desperate hegemony defenders, racing against both time and fanatical resistance. "Detention Block C is clear. Moving to Block D. Explosive charges detected on the main support structure. They're trying to bring down the whole section. Got them. Block D is evacuating now. 30 seconds to detonation. Everyone out." The transmission cut to static. For nearly a minute, Marcus stared at the tactical display, waiting for some sign that the Courage had escaped. Then, finally, Captain Park's voice crackled through the interference. "Wanderer, this is Courage. We're clear of the facility with 473 rescued. The complex is gone, but everyone made it out." Cheers erupted throughout the Wanderer's bridge, but Marcus felt no celebration. The hegemony's willingness to murder their own property rather than lose it marked a new level of desperation and cruelty. As the day progressed, the scope of their success became clear. 47 facilities attacked, 45 successfully liberated. Nearly 8,000 enslaved beings rescued in a single coordinated operation, but the cost had been significant. 3 railroad ships lost, 42 crew members dead, and hundreds of prisoners executed by their captors rather than freed. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Mitchell," Kira announced as the last of the rescue operations concluded. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen, her expression grim, despite the day's victories. "Captain Kane, congratulations on a successful operation, but you need to know, the Hegemony Council has just declared martial law across their entire territory. They're mobilizing every available military asset for a counter-offensive." "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. 72 hours, maybe less. They're calling it Operation Final Solution, complete eradication of the Underground Railroad and any world that has harbored refugees. The implications were staggering. The hegemony was essentially declaring war on a quarter of the inhabited galaxy in order to eliminate a rebellion that had grown far beyond their ability to contain. "Admiral, we need evacuation support for the refugee populations. There are worlds with thousands of former slaves who will be slaughtered if the hegemony reaches them." Already in motion, the Colonial Defense Force is experiencing a sudden surge in training exercises near vulnerable systems. "We'll do what we can, but you need to understand, this is bigger than just the railroad now. You've started a galactic civil war." After the Admiral's transmission ended, Marcus found himself alone on the bridge, staring out at the stars and contemplating the enormity of what they had unleashed. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, but success came with a terrible price. Kira entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the latest casualty reports. "The medical teams have finished their preliminary assessments. We lost good people today, but we saved 8,000 lives." "And how many will die in the war we just started?" Marcus asked. "How many would die if we had done nothing?" Kira countered. "Marcus, look at what we've accomplished. 6 months ago I was property on an auction block, believing my life had no value. Today, I helped coordinate an operation that freed 8,000 people and inspired resistance movements on dozens of worlds." She moved to stand beside him at the viewport. The hegemony was always going to try to eliminate every free being in the galaxy. The only difference is that now we're fighting back. Marcus nodded slowly, accepting the weight of leadership in a cause that had grown far beyond anything he had originally envisioned. "Signal all ships. We're falling back to the secondary bases and beginning Phase 2 operations." "Phase 2? If the hegemony wants a war, we'll give them one, but it'll be fought on our terms with our tactics for our principles." He turned to face her, and she saw in his eyes the same determination that had driven him to free a single slave girl at an auction. "We're going to teach them what humans do when someone threatens the things we protect." As the Wanderer and her sister ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying 8,000 newly freed beings towards safety, Marcus reflected on how far they had all come. What had started as one man's refusal to let a young woman remain enslaved had become a galaxy-wide movement for freedom. The Underground Railroad was no longer just a rescue organization, it was the symbol of hope for every enslaved being in known space. And as long as there were people willing to fight for freedom, that symbol would endure. Behind them, the hegemony's facilities burned, their slave markets empty, their power broken. Ahead lay a war that would determine the future of galactic civilization. But Marcus had no doubt about the outcome. Humanity had always been at its best when fighting impossible odds, and now they weren't fighting alone. The galaxy was about to learn what freedom looked like when people refused to accept anything less the end.